It started with What Would Laura Roslin Do? And now we're asking, What would Sharon Raydor do? Welcome to the What Would Sharon Raydor Do podcast with the woman who knows her best, Mary McDonnell. This week, we're going to be doing a little bit of a catch up episode talking about the last few episodes of Major Crimes and maybe a little bit of what we can expect going forward. I'm Mina Sharpe. I'm the editor of MajorCrimesTV.net and so happy to be here with Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Very excited. There's been a lot going on.
Yeah, there has been a lot going on, and it is really comforting to be here with you and to be here with Chelsea. And yay, say hi, Chelsea. And uh, we're trying to catch up a little bit in this podcast. We're not going to try and cover everything, but we do want to jump back in and sort of address your wonderful questions from the last couple of episodes because there's been some major events, and we'd love to talk about them.
Yeah, so we've had lots and lots of questions about, of course, we have to start with Shandy and the engagement and all that that has happened. This has been a big development. What what was it like for you going into this and finding out this was actually going to happen after many years of them laying the groundwork?
Well, it was a surprise, but it was a surprise for Sharon. So the is was the is. You know what I mean? You just played what was. Um, and so that was interesting. It was interesting to have it come out of the blue and have it be something that she certainly has not been pining for and having nothing to do with how much she loves Andy. He's totally lovable, but this is a woman who I personally don't think is in any hurry to really get married again and to risk all that that implies and to there really isn't any reason to other than spiritual, honestly, to get married again. So to have it come out of the blue in a more let's see, what's the word? Uh I can't think of the word, but it's it's sort of traditional the way it occurred. You know, there was she walked into the apartment, there were flowers and candles and music and a table set on the porch and the wink wink nod nod with the men and there's not a woman alive who doesn't respond to that like emotionally. That's pretty cool. But in a larger sense, the sort of shock, we didn't hear much from Sharon, but I think we sensed that she was a bit shocked.
Yeah, she had definitely,
Yes,
when we're fade to
it
black, she's very surprised.
right. I think that that was a very complicated shock. It wasn't just the overwhelming feeling that you get when you're being proposed to. It implies a lot in her life that in Sharon Rader's complexity is not easy to quite work through. So that's what I love about it because I think otherwise it's kind of a fairy tale and I don't think Major Crimes is about that. It certainly hasn't been about that with her. Um it was fun to shoot, of course. We all got a kick out of it, and Stacey K was crying. You know what I mean. It was really adorable, uh, and and all that jazz. But it does bring up some dilemmas, and they don't. And you know, this is very hard to I really think that at the core, we're talking about a woman who appears to be conventional who isn't. She has tried to be conventional her whole life. She has great respect for order, for justice, and all these things. And she has raised these wonderful young adults beautifully, pretty much single handedly, and she kept a marriage together long past her own happiness in it out of conventional commitment. But she's at the point in her life where convention doesn't matter anymore. So to me, it's sort of the convention of an engagement and getting married has a thrilling effect, and it really did have that effect on her and on me. But there's a part of her that isn't quite comfortable with having to be conventional again. She'd rather be some part of her free to not have any of the convention laid on top of this relationship that's already complicated by his alcoholism. That's kind of a scary thing for her. Her terrible relationships with men in the past. You know, there's so many layers. They work together, they risk their lives every day together and separately. So it was a complex of feelings
Yeah.
in that moment. And then, oh, we haven't gotten there yet? Yes, we have. Then we had this week, right? Where are we?
Yes. But
So
this
then
week.
the squad found out.
Right.
Ricky, of course, like Ricky's like this overgrown puppy. He just like bounds into rooms and he's off and running with his own agenda, you know, and I would have to say that that's part of what Sharon loves about him, and she wants to wring his neck simultaneously. Um, so when Ricky kind of spilled the beans, that was actually fun. It was because it was so obvious to Sharon and Andy that the people in the squad were delighted for them. There was no, you know, there was nothing negative. And I think that that was a revelation to a certain extent. You know what I mean? And it was probably because Provenza didn't get a chance to comment. If he had had a monologue in the middle of that, you know what I mean? So that was delightful. I love that. And then, of course, you know, it got complicated again.
So going into that,
Yeah.
one of the things Ricky did last week was to just sort of just take it upon himself to go ask Jack for an annulment and really kind of get involved in both Sharon and Andy's personal business, trying to, I think with the best of intentions with Rusty, move this along because he's decided he's okay with it, so they should just get on with it, get married.
I think what I experienced sitting there when these two young men were up to their fulfilling their own agenda, I remember Sharon sitting there thinking the narcissism of the typical male in his 20s is just astonishing at times because neither one of them were communicating with her about what she was thinking or feeling. They were trying to be heroic on their own terms for what they think she needs. And, you know, we didn't explore that, but that's absolutely what she was sitting there thinking.
Right,
She
yeah.
knows more about the Catholic Church than her son knows, but she was being told. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
About how that's going to
Well,
maneuver.
and I just think Sharon has shown over and over again she's so independent. She
Yeah.
takes charge of her own life. And
Yeah.
I just kept wondering, have they thought about what Sharon thinks about them getting involved in all of this?
Yes. Well, what she was thinking silently was that she was slightly annoyed, and and at times very annoyed, and also really and truly the issue is not really so much do we have to figure out right away about a church wedding. There's no other reason to get married on some level for her at this point except spiritually. None of the rest of it matters. The convention does not. But there is something quite beautiful in my knowledge of marriage. There's a spiritual journeying that you commit to. And when you get married late, you're committing for that until, when you say for better or for worse, you're talking about the sick bed. You're talking about when you lose your mind, I will feed you or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Knock on wood, it's not that. But when you get to be my age and Andy's age and Provenza's age, you do think completely differently about what does it mean to have a life partner now that's committed to me for the rest of my life. There's something very moving about that. So I think she's working on that, on what would it mean spiritually, and for Sharon to have something be spiritually fulfilled or have a ritual that was made sense to her, that had the symbology of her own spirituality. In her world, it's Catholicism. So now that it's complicated because they're both divorced. But she knows how to deal with the church. So that's what kind of made her laugh, is that, they were trying to fix it for her to make it easier for her. I don't think she's in any hurry. So
And this was a little bit my question when I was
Yeah.
watching that is, we've seen in the past Sharon talking about, she stayed married to Jack even when there wasn't a marriage for a long time because in part it was convenient and it helped with her job and in kind of in some ways not have to worry about advances from other men. There's a lot of things. Could the church, do you think part of the church thing could be in that same vein of, it's maybe she didn't necessarily need it fixed in that moment because it was there and that was sort of a way to kind of stall without maybe wanting to necessarily stall.
I don't, yeah, I understand what you're saying, Mina. I don't think stall, which you're also saying, not necessarily stall. I think it's not necessarily stall, but I do think it is. She wants to also take some time to get to know who Andy is as someone who's going to get married to her. She doesn't know anything about that yet. I think engagements are phenomenally important because the person that you know as a boyfriend is a very different person than that you know or girlfriend. As a fiance is a very different person you know as a wife, husband, wife, and then again a very different person as a mother, father, which they don't have to worry about. So Sharon is wise enough to know that she needs to watch Andy and what Andy feels about having to talk to his ex-wife about getting that would be a good process for Andy, and these guys took it away from him. That's annoying. It would have been very good for Andy to sort of have to tangle with that and come out of it, intact. Do you know what I'm saying? Anyway, these are Sharon's ideas. I think in the writing we have a tendency to protect Andy. As we do in life, we have a tendency to protect adorable men. We just do as a culture. They get away with a lot. And we protect them from different, uncomfortable things at times. That is not to say he's not a heroic cop and a wonder,
Right,
you
right.
know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fine print of how this culture works. And marriage in this culture right now, in this day and age, seems to have taken a very conventional turn again. Whereas even when I remember in the 50s when things started to get very conservative and conventional, hearing stories about the 40s, 30s, and 20s where a lot of people stayed married their whole lives, but they didn't always stay a couple. It's very interesting what's happened in this country. We've become a little conservative again around some of these containers we create in order to make sense out of our lives. So I just think she wants to explore it. I don't think she wants to rush or fix, or there's nothing wrong. They can be engaged. They can be engaged for a year and a half, for 2 years. She wouldn't care. So the boys, what I'm not quite sure of, and I hope I get to find out at some point, why did they do that? Why did they jump out all over this to try and sort of railroad it through? That's the thing. I guess they both, in their innocence, would love to pay her back for everything she's done for them. And I think they're both. What I do know about young men in their 20s, too, is they start to turn around and go, wow, look what my mom is and has done. And they're young men now, so they want to protect you from that point on. They want to make up for all the things you did for them and put up with them and all that kind of stuff. So I sort of could feel that that's what was happening too. They were trying to be men taking charge.
Yeah, it certainly seemed like it came from a place of love and
Absolutely.
wanting to help,
Yeah.
just maybe not thinking it through quite as much as they could have as to what she might want. But to their perspective, it was
Yeah.
exactly what she
Yeah.
would want, and that
That's
they
right.
wanted
They
to
took
just
care of it. She didn't have to
push it
think
through.
about it.
Yeah.
Let's go shopping for dresses. I know I'm terrible because I have to say that I read some fans' comments sometime on Twitter a couple weeks ago when the episode aired and there was a blackout, and this fan just went berserk on the idea that Sharon might say no and how furious she'll be, and that would be the end of it for her. And I just thought I wanted to address her in this podcast and say, I really get how charming and wonderful and everything Andy is, and how much we all love Shandy, and they're a wonderful couple. But isn't it more interesting to explore the fine print of what might or might not work for them than to explore the sort of conventional romantic ending. Um, so I just wanted to throw that out there and see what
Yeah.
you fans think about what I just said.
Well, I think we heard, I've, looking through the comments and things, saw a lot of people frustrated about that fade to black.
Oh yeah,
And, what,
that was
and
hard
then
on
jumping
people,
from that to now we're engaged.
right? And we never heard
Right.
what she
Right.
felt or.
So do you have thoughts about how that all went? I mean, was it just, did Sharon just agree and off they went? Or do you think she had that discussion with Andy
I
about
think
wanting different things?
I think she talked a bit with him about it. I think she said yes, and I also think she said, "And let's take it slowly." And It wasn't. It wasn't either she or Andy that rushed things. It was the
Right.
boys. I mean, I think Andy's perfectly happy to take it at any speed she wants. He just wanted to know someday you'll be my wife. I mean, that's a guy thing. What can I say? um,
And Andy seems a little old fashioned in the way if you love somebody,
Yes, he
you
is.
propose to them, and that's just the
Yeah.
way it goes, like we were talking about. He's a little more conventional.
Yes, he is, for sure. And I think she loves that about him. So I think basically what happened was they had a wonderful evening. Do you know what I mean? And she really was touched and thrilled. And she said, let's get used to this a bit. And he's like, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't see Andy having any trouble. And the fact that it just worked out for him that he doesn't have to deal with his ex-wife. That's so Andy.
He got the best. He got the best of all everything here.
Yeah, he keeps getting the best of all deals. But he's totally fine about not rushing into this and sort of figuring out what does that mean? What does it mean to have these two people decide? There really isn't a reason to do it unless you define it. And I think in where we're headed, once it is time to start to define those things. I do think a church. I think something spiritual is going to have to be important to this because otherwise there's no reason to do it. That's my thought. James and I haven't quite gotten into it, but I do think we're on the same page.
Oh, good.
I do.
That's exciting. So
Yeah.
that's for looking forward for next season and how
Yeah.
that's going to play out. Great.
We'll see though. I mean,
Right.
anything can happen.
Yeah. So kind of switching gears a little bit because we are covering a few episodes that we haven't talked about. Stro. It seems like we're back. We're back there again, and he's been hanging over the head of the show and Sharon since before she took over the division, and now that it seems like he's back, do you have a way you'd like to see it play out for this to end, or do you think it's important for Sharon as part of her career to finally get this solved and resolved?
I would say in television land, it might be important to Sharon to take on Stroh and to sort of finalize the legacy and sort of honor Brenda Lee, actually, because nobody worked harder at putting this guy behind bars than Brenda Lee. I mean, Sharon stood there and watched Brenda Lee scratch the DNA off this guy's face, and she'll never forget that. So there's many ways in which getting Stroh would be the completion. You know what I'm saying? In television land. In life, I'm not sure that the Strohs in our lives, although very few of us, thank God, have anything remotely close to his evil. But I'm not sure they don't get resolved a different way or whatever. All I know is for now, he's showing up again, and it presents terrible stress, and it's very scary. So if we get preoccupied with Stroh again, it's going to get quite dark in there, and I'm not really sure which way it's going to go. But it puts a little damper on everything, because if he is present, he's got to be handled, and everything else has to go by the back burner. And it's going to be even scarier with Rusty, because she can't control and protect Rusty in the same way she could even a couple years ago. So Rusty's out there and he's going to have to figure it out. And Rusty, as we know, is a bit of a daredevil. So it's all a little it's yeah, it's a little imposing, and I'm not sure what James is thinking about yet.
And we've seen Sharon show so much grace under pressure. She's always got these terrible stressors, but now it seems like a lot of things could be coming to a head. Andy's health, is seems like it's still sort of on the edge. Stroh's back, the political situation at work with the assistant chief job,
Yeah.
plus all the day-to-day cases, which, we see continue to be horrific and, stressful and
Yeah.
taxing. Is there a point where you think this can all come to a head for her? And, what do you think her mechanisms are for coping with all of this coming at her all the time?
Well, it depends on how it lays out. You know what I'm saying? If it lays out that it's all there all at once, we probably a, will see some other colors from her than we've seen so far. Um, if these are thematic things that we explore over the next few years, then they'll introduce us to different parts of her because they're going to be more personal than what we've seen so far. So I do think we'll get a finer glimpse into what she's been willing to reveal about herself personally.
So, Chelsea had a great question in terms of, you know, Sharon and Andy got engaged and they were not going to tell people.
Right.
But we heard them say, oh, we were going to have everyone over for a big party and it was going to be,
Yeah.
Then we would tell you.
Yeah.
So was that the plan, or were they kind of winging that and had to kind of come up quickly with a...
Well, no, I think they were going to do that. I think they decided it would be actually kind of fun because, and also as a boss, I think whenever you nurture the family feeling in a squad of any kind in any workplace, you're doing a good thing. And so why not use this, as a way to, bring people closer in a way. But they hadn't picked a date. They hadn't figured
Right.
it out. And then there he was, the overgrown puppy dog. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was just so adorable, and he's such a good actor. So when he comes in with all of this, you know what I mean? It's really, it's quite awesome to tangle with. But once again, no, I think she just basically said, let's enjoy this ourselves for a while before we give it to everyone else.
It was lovely to see how engaged the team was and how supportive.
They were so sweet
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
They were genuinely happy, and I think that was so comforting to both Sharon and Andy.
Right. And just to see, it's what's so beautiful about a TV show that runs for many years is we can see the
Yeah.
change from when Sharon came in and, was just so disliked by everyone for everything she had done to now 5 years later, this is where we're at. And I think that's just wonderful to see that evolution happen in real time.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So now that the engagement is public,
Yeah.
it's Ricky threw it out there right in the middle of the squad room, so it's there. Is that they're going to be fallout from that in terms of that's going to get back to Winnie Davis pretty quickly, and this whole race for chief is ongoing.
Yeah. Well, the race for chief is really I think it's so interesting because you've got now you have four, including Winnie, very capable professionals up for a job that three out of the four don't want, but none of the others want the fourth to have. So you have these people pushing each other into a role, that they don't really want, but should want. So that's kind of a wonderful James Duff counterintuitive move. I love when he does that. You would expect them all to be competing like crazy to get the promotion, to be empowered, to be above, the next level. And none of them want it because they all love their jobs. And their jobs are so interesting and they're all running divisions and yada, yada. So I do think, though, that Sharon does feel the pressure of the squad wanting her to take the job in order to protect the Major Crimes Division. So I do think that she has a bit of ambivalence about the situation and has been trying to in a way, play both possibilities as fully as possible. This engagement could be a cheap shot that Winnie Davis could take and use somehow against Sharon getting this position. So I'm sure that Sharon has considered it, and it wasn't exactly the right time to say, "Hey, guess what? We're coworkers and we're engaged." So it wasn't exactly the right time in terms of Winnie Davis either and her agenda. And there is a bit of a vulnerability there. And that's interesting too, because now there's a vulnerability for a job that Sharon really doesn't want in the first place. But she feels, this is going to present a problem in case I have to take the job because I don't want my squad to be destroyed, So it is pretty complicated. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and we've seen Sharon act in such selfless ways before. When they're talking about you
Yeah.
have to do this to protect them, you can really see her thinking that through, and that
Yeah.
being something she has to do.
I don't think she really wants to, though. The same way I'm saying, I have this feeling that she's at a point in her life where the shoulds and the conventions are starting to slip away.
Exactly. Old conventional
Yeah.
Sharon would have wanted this job.
Yeah, she would have taken it, of
Unconventional
course.
Sharon is more than
It's
happy
like,
to
you
just
know
stay
what?
where she's at.
This has been very rewarding for her to run Major Crimes, to be in the field at times, to be directly involved with the solution and the crime solving. That's been good for her.
Yes.
And why should she mess with that? She doesn't apparently need the money because she's still wearing those great suits. You know what I mean? Oh dear, I don't think she needs a new apartment. I know they went house hunting, but it didn't seem to go anywhere. I think, there's so much about her life that's fine. And I think she knows it. And she's not in. It's very interesting in life you when you grow past the aspiring years, when you finally kind of go, oh, well, I accomplished a lot of what I want. I didn't accomplish a lot of what I want. Both are true, but it worked out. I don't really feel that adrenaline towards aspiring, but I do feel a more idiosyncratic urge to define things personally. And that's where I'm using that in her, in sort of experimenting with that with Sharon right now at this turning point. Does she really want to need to be married? Does she really want to need to be an assistant chief and deal with bureaucracy and politics? Yeah, she got a little bit more money. Does she need the money? Do the kids need the money? Is there a better pension? I don't know. You know what I mean? But 10 years ago, it would have been
Right.
get that job. And that's what she's trying to convince Mason. It's a no-brainer. You're a young man. You could go all the way. This is a step for you. Go. You're perfect. And John Tenney, he doesn't want it either. He's like, Sharon, I think you need to do this.
It is interesting, though, to see and to think about that. To have a character on TV who is satisfied and
I know
happy
it.
in her own skin,
I know.
happy in her life, and not just, that's something we don't usually see. Everyone's out there trying to get the next promotion or trying to get
That's right.
the next guy or all that. It's,
Yeah,
it's
that's
beautifully
absolutely right.
refreshing.
It is refreshing. And it's almost like, she swims out there in waters by herself, Sharon Rader. As far as I can see, there's not, I don't know, is there another woman like her on television who's her age in a position that she's in with a sort of sensibilities that are sound and kind of ethical and I don't know.
I don't think so. I'd be
I don't know if there's anybody out
hard
there
pressed
like
to
that.
think of one.
There's something about the health of that is revolutionary because we're not spending time with the central character that is full of angst or self-destructive. She's self-destructive with men, but I think she's finally got a handle on that. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it is kind of fascinating, but she does seem to be out there. Okay. Anyone else coming?
Right.
I guess, yes, there's a lot of great women on TV. I mean, look at, what is it, Gracie and Frank? Frank and Gracie. Wow.
Watch that all weekend. It's
It's the best show. I saw Lily Tomlin in a restaurant a couple of weeks ago, and I practically jumped on her. Thank God we know each other already, because otherwise she would have been, "Hello, someone get this woman out of here," you know. But we do know each other, and it that is a fantastic show. There are women out there, obviously, at these turning points who are defining themselves and redefining themselves. I just think the more the better, because it's bringing up different questions about the lifeline to have these female characters out there. We're starting to learn more about what it is that happens at this age. Because, and also, it's not fair to men. Like the way men get painted as older men a lot on television, it's so nuts how screwed up they are. And that's there are a lot of wonderful men over 50 in this culture who are also finding a grace in the lack of climbing that we're not seeing. Because I think we're afraid they're not traumatic. And yet what this show is finding out is they're so hungry for people who they can relate to and feel, oh, the world isn't going to fall apart tomorrow with this group. I mean, that's part of why they love Major Crimes so much, why we all do, is that things will be okay a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right, absolutely.
Because every single one of these characters has, with their oddnesses or their idiosyncrasies or what have you, they're pretty solid humans. And I just like seeing more pretty solid humans over 50 on television. That's just sort of my, you know.
You know, and I think that's why we can even have these kind of discussions, is because these are solid, well-rounded, fleshed out characters that we can have discussions about. Whereas I think there's a lot of shows that you wouldn't be able to have that discussion with, because the character on what you see on film is all that there is.
Right. Right. It's fascinating, isn't it?
So a few weeks ago, Sharon told Rusty, when he was having this crisis of, you know, what to do about his relationship with Gus. Sharon told Rusty how police often have to follow their instincts about situations, and that is so much a part of their work. How has Sharon developed her own instincts, and how much does she listen to that in her job and in her life?
I think Sharon is very honoring of her own instincts at this point in her life, but it had to be something that she had to consciously cultivate. I think when you are a person who's taking care of a lot of people and you're using conventional means to keep sanity and you're dealing with dysfunction and potential abuse, you have a tendency to not necessarily always listen to your instincts or your intuition at your own cost, but no one else's. I think as life has gone on for her, and certainly once she was given the task of running Major Crimes and discovering really more of the detective in her, we've seen Sharon have hunches that she did not let go of, even if they weren't explained. We've seen her stay on a certain line, even if we're not sure what she's thinking, and then she gets it. So I think she has cultivated her own ability to trust her gut. It all happens in the gut, kids. You know, we're learning more and more about that. We used to think it happened in the brain. It happens, you know, in the intestines. And the signals are so interesting if you're not burdened by the brain. And I think that's what she was saying to Rusty, because he's so caught in his brain. He can't get out of it. So he has a feeling and he thinks that's just in the way, rather than honoring the feeling and letting the mind live in the heart. He breaks them up. And I think that she has learned more and more about letting her mind center itself in her heart as opposed to in her brain. You know what I mean? It's like the brain functions really, really well. It takes care of all that stuff. But the brain is not our sense of things in my experience. So I think she was trying to introduce him to that a little bit without, overwhelming him with.
Seems like you have to quiet the brain sometimes. You have to tell it to just stop and let everything else come and
Right.
have a
Which is
voice.
part of it, is to take this back to the question when she was at the dining room table and Ricky was coming at her with solving the Catholic Church. I think she was basically sitting there going, just let this all go on because I don't know yet what my intuition feels is right here yet. So let them go, whatever. When my intuition understands whether or not it needs a church wedding, it will know. In the meantime, whatever. And she's not afraid of the church. She knows the rules. Sharon understands probably she already knows what it's like to sit in front of an archbishop and talk about divorce. She went through it. So, separation, even. She knows what the patriarchy of the Catholic Church is about, and she also knows what the spirituality of it is about. So it's whatever. She can handle it. But she doesn't yet know clearly what her intuition is going to show her about the marriage. So it's sort of to take it back to that. I think without knowing about the marriage coming up, the engagement, at that point when Rusty was pulling himself to just sort of tearing himself apart with guilt and confusion and all these things, she was just trying to help him quiet down like you suggested and listen. If something in your gut is saying you love this guy but you can't move in with him or he can't move, or you can't do it, then you have to follow that can't. That following the can't could lead you to a can. But resisting the can't and punishing yourself for the can'ts and questioning why and pushing away the other guy that you're in love with because you feel you don't understand your own can't, that doesn't work. So that's what that was about.
Right. So kind of switching gears just a little bit, you have now played two different characters who have found love later in life and have been exploring the idea of finding love. And both of these characters have had love in the past
Yeah.
that perhaps wasn't so kind to them.
Yeah.
What differences and or similarities are you finding between playing Sharon with this relationship with Andy and Laura, finding Bill and her relationship with him on Battlestar?
Well, the biggest difference is that Laura's dying, and knowing you're dying is a different way of loving people than thinking you have decades ahead, which we all think all the time. No matter, when I'm 90, I'll think I've got another 20 years. So it's sort of that right away is different. Laura's feelings for Bill came out of the end of the human race, came out of the potential end of life as we know it. And there was a man standing side by side with her, coping with leadership during the potential end of the human race and whether or not it was even possible to save it. You fall in love with your partner who you're handling that gigantic thing with very differently. It was a feeling with her with Bill of destined karmic. If we finish out, if we end it, if we're done with all this tomorrow, I will see you in the next incarnation. That's how that one felt to her, and very peaceful about it. It wasn't neurotic. Because she's dying. Whether or not the human race lives, she's out the door. He knows that. There's a different level of what does it mean to share the last moments of your life with someone who understands equally the leadership position. That's what that was about. It was falling in love with leadership. Shared leadership is a very deep experience, and they fell in love through that. And that was beautiful, a beautiful feeling. Andy's like, "You're kidding me. Are you kidding me? At this point in my life, someone this charming, this much fun, this innocent, this, heroic in his way. All of these things that are just so delightful. That's what that is for her. I mean, Bill Adama was not light. Do you know what I mean? He's a heavy dude. His energy, his thoughts, he's deep, he's heavy, there's a lot of mass there that was for Sharon, not Sharon, for Laura, very comforting. Andy is light. It's, oh my gosh, I'm laughing again in these silly little ways. It's fun. It has a different note, and it feels like, well, geez, would you be fun to, like, if we got really old together, you might be a lot of fun. We would still be laughing. That's what it feels like, and that love's growing out of that delight of, it's a lighter love. It just is. That's the way I'm experiencing it. You know, like we talked a little bit earlier about, Andy has a simplicity that is so endearing. And I would never attach the word simplicity to Bill Adama. William Adama was a handful of a great man, but you had to be up to it. You know what I mean? Because his passions were really extreme, but his passion to protect her in her death was extraordinary. I'm getting teary eyed. Sorry.
No, but it's
Yeah,
beautiful
because I
because
think she's dead. You know what I mean? And I don't know what happened to him in the cabin. And
but it's interesting to have had the chance to play one set of characters who have fell in love because of their similarities, the similar
Yes.
positions, the similar situation in life.
Yeah.
And now Sharon and Andy, who really
Are not similar
are
at
not
all.
similar at all. It's their differences that have attracted her to him and
That's right.
all of that.
That's right. And it isn't really. They are colleagues, but they are not shared leaders. He does not have to carry the complexity. He is now in support of that in her position, and he's very supportive. But he doesn't have to carry it in his heart and soul. Whereas Bill Adama and Sharon and Laura Roslin went to sleep every night going, will we be able to save the human race? Are we putting all of these incredible young men and women at risk every time we send them out in a Viper? You know what I mean?
Right. Will there be tomorrow? Because
Will there be
is the
tomorrow?
ship going to be blown out of the sky tonight?
And I just have to use this moment to say how sad, thinking about leadership and Battlestar and survival in life, how sad still I am about losing Richard Hatch. He was such a delightful, delightful human being. He was so generous and funny and interesting and always involved and always had an idea about something else he was cooking up, and he was just, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And
I mean, he kept the franchise alive for a very long time.
he single-handedly kept the franchise alive, and he came to Ron's support when the previous fans were ready to, vilify him. He did a lot of really amazing things for Battlestar Galactica, the franchise. And I also think his performance as Tom Zarek was stellar. And what was really moving about that performance, talk about people playing leaders who see the potential end of the world or whatever, is that Tom Zarek was a bad guy, but Richard Hatch was a good guy, and the struggle that Richard had playing Tom became integral to Tom Zarek. And to me, that's when you're in the mastery years as an actor, when you just lend all your complexity to it, even if it's feeling like unsolved. Do you know what I mean? Your choices are unsolved. So he was beautiful to play with, and he was, even though there they were at odds. I know that Laura loved being around yet again another adult. And it was just too bad that he was up to some of the things that she felt he was up to, you know. But as you know, compared to Gaius Baltar, he was a welcome
Right. Oh, and
complexity. You know
Zarek
what I
had
mean?
a couple moments where he really redeemed himself
He
in a
did.
lot of ways.
He did. And working with him was a blast. I mean, he was such a mensch. One of the first things we had to do is we were handcuffed in the back of a truck on some planet. And that's how we met. And then the next thing we had to do was roll down a hill in our handcuffs. And the first time we did it, it was just like, and we looked up at each other and started laughing the second they said cut. His phone started ringing. So we're both laughing. He's talking to his son on the phone, who I got to meet at his memorial, delightful man. And he's picking me up all at once. Richard Hatch was a gentleman. And I just wanted to acknowledge that it's very sad.
Very sad. He'll be very, very much missed by everyone.
Oh my gosh. You know, which brings me to something I do want to bring up, which is that because I associate Richard Hatch with conventions. Richard Hatch is such a beloved convention attendee and gave his fans and all of us, and when we were new to it, Richard showed us how to do it. He showed us how to be there. He showed us the integrity of being present for your fans who are paying a lot of money on hotel rooms, flights, this, that, to come to your table. And I'm going to be doing my first convention without Richard around. I think he's almost been at every one I've ever done, Mina, right?
Yeah.
And every time I think about it, I get a little teary. But I'm going to be at Houston at Comic Palooza, and that is going to be on May 12th. No, 13th and 14th. May 13th and 14th. So if you haven't heard it yet, please come to Houston. And there is a possibility that Miss Olivia Jane Mell may be joining us and may be doing a gig in Houston while she's there. So that would be an added fun thing for all of us to
So
do.
you guys can get tickets at the Comic Palooza website, and Major Crimes TV will put some information up for it as well, so you can head to our page and get that information how to buy tickets. Mary will be attending on Saturday and Sunday, and we'll keep you posted if any of these other fun things come to pass that weekend as well.
And I hope you come. I haven't done one. When was the last time? About a year
been
ago?
over a year, yeah.
Over a year. So I'm very, very excited. Oh, I can't wait to get out there again. Yeah.
should be very fun.
It'll be a lot of fun. So this completes yet another episode of What Would Sharon Raydor Do? What Would Sharon Raydor Do is brought to you in part by MajorCrimesTV.net.